is not allowed to eat truma. Truma is eaten specifically by the Kohen. The Kohen, the Kohen's wife. The person who came from a home, she was never allowed to eat truma before, but now that she's married, she married a Kohen, she has a right to eat truma. Now she has children from the Kohen, then she continues to be able to eat truma, even if the Kohen passed away or she gets divorced. Once she has children from the Kohen and her children are able to eat truma, she's also able to go ahead and eat truma. But if she gets divorced or if the husband passes away, who was a Kohen, and she was the daughter of a non-Kohen, then she goes back to her father's house. She's not allowed to go ahead and eat truma anymore. So she goes back to her original status. So that's a little bit, the halacha by a woman who was a daughter of a non-Kohen who marries a Kohen. So you hear the story so far? The story clear?
Yes.
Okay. So now the Gemara talked about a case that if her husband went overseas, and we don't know, this lady was married to a Kohen. She's a daughter of Yisrael, and her husband went overseas. And now the question is her husband still alive? There's no form of communication to know if her husband's still alive. If her husband passed away, good morning. If the husband passed away, then she's not allowed to eat truma anymore. So does she have a right to continue eat truma with the idea, with the chazakah, that since her husband was alive when he left, so could she presume that her husband is still alive and she continue eat truma? So that's what the Mishnah stated. The Mishnah stated that she could continue eating truma. That's the Mishnah in Gittin. She can continue to eat truma. She doesn't have to be worried that maybe her husband passed away while he's overseas. And if the husband passed away, she's not able to eat truma anymore because they didn't have any children. She doesn't have to be afraid of that. That's what it said over there in Gittin. And then that was case one. We had a case two. The Gemara said that if someone gives a bill of divorce to his wife, and he made a condition on the bill of divorce. He said he wants the bill of divorce to take effect a moment before he passes away. He doesn't want to be divorced now. He wants to remain married to her. It should take effect a moment before he dies. So when he dies, that moment before, it should take effect. Now, why did the guy do such a thing? Why does he want his wife to be a divorcee? Because let's say they didn't have any children, and they didn't have any children, so the law is, person passed away without any children, the wife falls to yibum. There's a mitzvah for the brother of the deceased to marry his brother's wife, to have children, and the children, because they're being born as a result of the deceased, because he's marrying his brother's wife, one of Mr. Haber, so the deceased, the person who passed away, is going to live on in a certain sense because of those children that are being born as a result of him. Because only because he passed away is his brother marrying his wife. His brother has a right to marry his wife, and therefore those children that are being born into the world are directly as a result of the one who passed away, and therefore the one who passed away's name will live on through that. He'll get he'll share in some of the merits of the children that are being born, and the brother will the brother marries the wife, and the name of the brother lives on. So that's a little bit about the mitzvah of yibum. But let's say his brother is a guy that he's afraid it's going to be hard to find his brother. His brother travels a lot. He's afraid his brother might be away. for a long period of time, or his brother is away. He doesn't know where his brother is. So what's going to happen with his wife, Mr. Haber? You could try any of those two coffees. They're both for you. One is not so hot. Be forgiving. You could try both. Welcome. So he doesn't want his now. When a husband dies and there was no children, the wife cannot marry anyone until the deceased brother either marries her or performs they do chalitza, where she removes his shoe. And he doesn't want his wife to be stuck, because if the brother's not around to do it, she can't marry anybody else. She's not allowed to marry a woman. Is not allowed whose husband died and had no children. Can't marry anybody else until the process was done, either the marriage of the deceased brother or chalitza. So therefore, he created this situation where he gave her the get, the bill of divorce, with the condition to take effect a moment before he dies. So when he dies, a moment before, she's considered divorced. So therefore, she's not considered a widow. She's considered a divorcee. A divorcee does not fall to yibum to her husband, her ex's brother. She's a divorcee. There's no falling to yibum, and she's not allowed to marry her ex's brother. So and therefore that's going to prevent his wife from have to go through this process of his concern that maybe his brother won't be available to do any of the mitzvah of yibum and chalitza. He did a consideration for his wife. That, let's say, is I think they say that Beagleheisen, the guy, Mr. Beagleheisen, during the World Trade Center, when the Trade Center was hit, I think maybe it was him or someone else that he called, and he says he appointed an agent to give his wife a divorce. That's what I heard. I don't know if it's true. I didn't verify it, because he was afraid that if they won't find his body, she'll be stuck. So therefore, he called up and he appointed.
Strongly recommended by everybody.
I'm saying in a case like the World Trade Center, where a person's afraid that they're not going to find it, he was afraid that I presume that was the right thing for him to do, to make it easy for his wife that she shouldn't be stuck. So the Gemara said that if what happens if the latter case, the husband says to his wife, "I'm giving you this get, it's to take effect a moment before I die." So the question is, can she eat truma? Good morning, Max. Can she eat truma or is this woman forbidden to eat truma? Why? Because if any moment the husband pass away, so the moment before she was not allowed to eat truma. Because if she was divorced, the moment she gets divorced, she can't eat truma, because her father was not a kohen. Her husband's a kohen, but only she has a right to eat truma only as long as she's married to the kohen. The moment she gets divorced, she can't eat truma. And since any moment she could be a divorcee, because if the husband dies the next moment, that means a moment before she was divorced. So therefore she can't eat. Therefore, this opinion in the Mishnah says she's not allowed to eat truma. If the husband creates such a stipulation, the kohen makes such a stipulation with his wife, and he says to her that the divorce should take effect the moment before I die. Since it's possible he could die at any time, she's restricted from eating truma out of concern, out of a caution, because maybe the husband might die, and then right before that she wasn't able to eat truma, and maybe she's eating truma at a time that she's not allowed to eat truma. So that's the second case. So the Gemara says that's a contradiction. The latter case says we're afraid that maybe something is going to happen to the husband any moment, and therefore that will inhibit it, take her away from eating truma. And the first Mishnah stated, we're not afraid. The first Mishnah says that when the husband goes overseas, there's no concern that maybe he passed away. She could go ahead and she continue eating truma, even though maybe something happened to the husband overseas. So we see that one Mishnah we're concerned for maybe something happened to the person, and one Mishnah we're not concerned. Or as Mr. Haber said yesterday, you put like on the chazakah, the status that he was on today, do you say that status continues or not? Do you say if you don't know there's a change of status, you have to be concerned there's a change of status? Like the idea of a mikveh. A mikveh has a certain size of water. You don't know that the mikveh got less. Let's say you should be on one hand. There's a logic to say you can continue going to that mikveh. On the other hand, the mikveh might be a little different because mikveh is always losing water. So it's always possible to, if you don't know that you have the right amount of water, maybe it already lost. It's always going down. It's always constantly getting less as a result of people using the mikveh. Okay, so that's a different issue regarding mikveh. But here the Gemara brings out the apparent contradiction in two Mishnayot. One Mishnah indicates we're concerned that there's a change of status, and one says we're not concerned with change of status. You don't have to be concerned. So what did the Gemara say? So Abaye said, the way Abaye explained the contradiction, he said it's two different rabbis. It's two different people talking. If it will be the same person talking, then the person's contradicting themselves. But if it's two different opinions of two different rabbis, that one rabbi is concerned, we'll call him the more cautious rabbi, that he's concerned for the possibility. Takes a more approach. And we said yesterday, this rabbi and takes a certain approach. Like we do find there's a Rabbi Meir that we find the Gemara that says he's concerned for the minority situation. So we'll see if he's how he lines up over here. But maybe the one opinion that's concerned, because if is the more cautious opinion, and the opinion that's not concerned is a less cautious opinion. And the Gemara Abaye, in the reading of the Gemara over here, was that Abaye identified Reb Meir as the less cautious, which is not in sync with Reb Meir's general opinion that he is more cautious. But he identified that when it comes to death, he said Reb Meir is not concerned that death happened. You don't have to be concerned that death happened. That total new event, the person's alive, you could say he's still in the same status. And he's the author of the Mishnah that said, and the husband goes overseas, continue eating truma. You don't have to worry that maybe something happened to the husband. However, Rav Yehuda is concerned for death. And maybe something happened. And therefore, Rav Yehuda is the one who says that when he gives the get with the condition that it should take effect the moment before he dies, we have to be concerned. Maybe he's dying any moment. That's Rav Yehuda. And the Gemara illustrated this with a Braita to try to show this phenomenon that Rav Meir is not concerned and Rav Yehuda is concerned. And if that is, by the way, and this whole thing is the buildup for the question of the Gemara, because we went on record to say that Rav Meir is afraid that the animal, if you use an animal as a wall of a sukkah, Rav Meir is afraid the animal might die. And the animal might die, it shrivels up a little bit, it loses its height, and therefore you might be losing on the height, you might be missing the proper height for a sukkah. So you told me that Rav Meir is concerned for death, and here we say Rav Meir is not concerned for death. That's the Gemara's contradiction. In Rav Meir, now it's the same rabbi, we got a contradiction. We have the same rabbi going two different directions. One time Rav Meir is concerned for death of an animal, and Rav Meir is not concerned for the death of the human being, and the Gemara illustrates. Simon, your chair, you're right. I have a place right over here. So there's a. By the way, Max, be careful with that coffee. You don't want to knock it over. Okay, so the Gemara says, and where did the Gemara illustrate Rav Meir is not concerned for death? So the Gemara says, the Tanya. We learned in the Braita. We are on Chav Gimel on the base. We're on 23b. Simon, if I can look at yours for a second, your Gemara for a second. 23b. In the Art Scroll, we are 23b2. Well, really 23b1 at the end. The last couple lines of the page, 23b1. The Tanya, we learned in the Braita. Halokeach yain bein hakutim. If someone bought wine from the kutim with people. Now the story is that grain that grows in the Holy Land are obligated in truma and maaser. You have to give truma to the kohen, and the kohen gets part of the grain, and the Levi gets certain things. Certain things you have to take to Yerushalayim to eat. That's called Masa Sheni. Also, we have the idea of besides that, we got Masa Ani. Certain times you have to go ahead and give to the poor person, right? Everyone knows the calendar, which review the calendar for everybody, how it goes. It goes that the first year and there's a 6-year cycle, then the 7th year is Shemitah. The first year and the second year, you got to go ahead and every year you got to give to the Kohen. Every year of the 6 years, you got to give to the Kohen. That's constant. Every year you got to give to the Levi. There are certain years that the second that you have something called Masa Sheni, the 10% you got to give to bring to Jerusalem to eat, you yourself and your family or other people. Your produce has to be brought to Jerusalem. That's every first and second and fourth and fifth year of the cycle. You have 10% goes to Jerusalem to eat. And the third and sixth year of the cycle, you don't have to take 10%. You don't take 10% to Jerusalem. You give that 10% to the poor people. Okay? That's called Masa Ani. So now we have a situation. There was a so what do you do first? The first thing is you take off Truma. First thing is the Kohen gets first. The Torah does not give an amount how much you have to give to the Kohen, and the average person gives 1/50th, 2% to the Kohen. 2% mistake around the deal. And every year of the cycle, every year of the grain that grows, he gets 2%. That's the average guy. The guy who has a good eye gives 2.5%. He gives 1/40th. The guy who has a bad eye, stingy, gives 1/60th. That's how the Gemara talks about the different types of classes of people: the good eye, the bad eye, and the medium guy in the middle. And the order, the way it goes is you first give the Kohen, and then you give the Levi. And then after you give the Levi, then that's why the Levi is called Maaser Rishon, the first Maaser. And after you give the Levi, then during the first and second and fourth or fifth year is Maaser Sheni, is the 10% that you go ahead and you take to Jerusalem. And we have the situation, there were people that were called the Kuthites, the Kuthim. The Kuthim, they were people that worshiped gods. They were non-Jews that were brought to the Holy Land from a land called Kuta. And from other places, from a certain king, from the king of Assyria. And he placed them in a part of Israel that was desolate after the 10 tribes went into exile. The Kutim, they converted to Judaism. As a result, there was lions that killed some of a portion of the Kutim, and they got scared, and they converted to Judaism. And this opinion holds. There's a question: what was their conversion? There's a whole question: was their conversion a good conversion or not a good conversion? Did they really, at the time that they converted, did they really give up the other gods? Did they really accept God properly or not? That's called, were they Geirei Emet? Were they true converts or not? The opinion of this Mishnah holds that they were true converts. Later on, when the rabbis eventually made them like Goyim, because they saw they were worshiping idols, and there was a whole, they made them, they no longer had the status of Jewish status. But this Mishnah is talking about, or this Braita is talking at a time period that before the rabbis treated them like Goyim. And let's see what he says over here. Now, the food that grew in their field, being if you hold that Jews, they have the same status like other Jews, that their food has to be tight and has to go truma to the Kohen. But the Kutim, even though they might have been, according to his opinion, you consider them true Jews, true converts, but they would not so careful in the mitzvot of the Torah, and there was a concern that they did not. There were certain mitzvot that they were very careful about, but let's say in many mitzvot they weren't careful about, and you have to suspect that they did not take off truma and maser. So if you're going to go in and buy food from these kutim, you're going to, if I would be selling wine, I'm supposed to take off the truma and the maser and then sell it. I'm not supposed to be selling untyped tevel. But if someone's a kuti, so then he is someone who you have to be suspect very strongly. Rashi says it's like a definite that they did not take off their types. Now, so what happened over here? So here's the Gemara. Amar Abaye, lo kasha. Abaye had stated lo kasha. Abaye explained to answer the two Mishnayot by saying hara mehar the lo chayish lamita, hara bihuda the chayish lamita. The case that we're concerned that the Kohen died is according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that's concerned for death, and the case that we're not afraid of the Kohen dying, that's the opinion of Meir that's not concerned for death. The Tanya, we learned it right. Where do the Gemara says? Where is this illustrated? The Tanya halkeach yayin and bein hakutim. Someone bought wine from these kutim, okay, and we're going with the opinion that they're Jews. There's an obligation to take off the tithes, but you suspect they didn't do it. And what happened was, the Friday afternoon, we're late in the day. And since it's Friday afternoon, and let's say the Jewish person doesn't have time before the Shabbat, he doesn't have the time to separate the Truman and the Maisrot. Let's say he doesn't have the proper utensils that are tahor, that are clean. He only has utensils that are contaminated. You can't put truma in contaminated utensils. You can't put the Ma'aser Sheni in contaminated utensils. So he's stuck, and he wants to drink the wine for Shabbat. There's a mitzvah. He has kiddush. He wants to go ahead and not only kiddush. It's also brought down that during the meal of Shabbat itself, to have wine at the meal. But it's an honor for the Shabbat. You have wine during the meal itself. So, but he has no time to separate the truma and the Ma'aser. Some learn that we're talking about it's already twilight. It's already past sunset, and hey, you have to be concerned. There's certain things that you're allowed to do at that time, that you can't do at that time. You can't do things that are, if something that's prohibited on a Torah level, you wouldn't be able to do. But this is the issue of, but this is something that they're allowed to do at this time period. He's allowed to. So what is he allowed to do? So he's allowed. He's going to say, I'm going to take off after Shabbat. I'm going to take off. He calls out let's say there's 100 lugim, 100 lugim. Let's say a lug is let's say we'll call it 12 ounce, 112 ounces in this vat of wine. And he says so we'll call it for our purpose 100 pints. So he says, you know what? I'm going to take off 2 pints. 2 pints that I plan on taking off after Shabbat. They're going to be truma, because I have to give 2 out of the 100 to the Kohen, 2%. He says. What did he say? Because he's not able to take it off before Shabbat. He doesn't have the time to take it off. He doesn't have the proper utensils to take it off,
But he wants to do the first thing.
But he wants to right after Shabbat. But what he wants to do now is he wants to do something now to enable him to drink the wine now on Shabbat. On Shabbat. How is he going to? I mean, he hasn't separated. So what does he need to do? So he's going to go ahead. He's going to call out. He's going to say the two lugim, the 2 that I'm going to separate after Shabbat, they're going to be the truma. They're going to be truma right now, which means that when I take it off after the 2 pints that I take off after Shabbat, they are the ones that I called out right now as Truma. I'm calling out that I'm calling out right now, let's say at twilight, I'm calling out the 2 pints should have the status of Truma. And which now, how do you identify? I didn't separate it. But when I separate it after Shabbat, we're going to say that those 2 pints that I separated after Shabbat these are the 2 pints that I called out right now. Now, the obvious question is, how could you say that those 2 pints that you took off after Shabbat are the 2 pints that you're calling out? You can't identify which are the 2 pints. So this opinion holds that we don't need to have clear ID now. You don't have to separate. As long as you're going to separate it later on, we could say it's good enough that we look at it as if those 2 that you separate after Shabbat are the 2 that you called out at this moment. I called out at this moment that 2 lugim, look at the language of the Gemara. The Tanya, we looked at the Braita. Halokeach yain ben akutim. Someone buys wine from the kutim, and he needs to separate. And what does he do? He says, Omer, shnei lugim, shani atil hafrish, 2 lugim that I plan on separating after Shabbat, harihim truma. They have a status of truma right now. There is on 2 pints that are in the barrel right now, 2 of the pints that are in the barrel right now, Max, are truma. Which 2 pints? The ones that I will separate after Shabbat, those are the ones that are now truma right now. And we say it's something called breira. You could say that when you choose later on after Shabbat, that will be considered, those that you chose, we can consider it falls into place, exactly. And therefore, we could say that those 2 are the 2 that you called out right now. But now therefore he in a sense, he dealt with the truma because he's already called out the truma. But now he has to do what the master is shown. What about the 10% he has to give to the Levi? And then he says the same thing. 10 pints. Now he doesn't have to give 10 pints, but he also give out of 98, you give 10% of what's left. If you started with 100 pints and you gave 2 pints, so now you're left with how much? 98. You said you started with you had 100 pints of wine. You said I'm going to give 2 pints for the Kohen. So how much you have left of yours? 98. So from the 98, you got to give 10% to the Levi. From that 98. So what's 10% of 98? 9.8. So you say 9.8 that I have 9.9 pints and 8/10 of a pint that I want to call that I'm going to take out off after Shabbat should be for the Levi. He's separating now for the Levi. So that's what we'll see tomorrow more about what he's going to do, and then we'll continue tomorrow to get more clarity on the subject. Okay, have a great day, everybody.